All right, it's Booker and Stryker with Mark Foster of Foster the People.
What's happening, buddy?
Good to see you guys.
Okay, this is your first time chatting with dumbbells like us, hosts in many years.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what you're feeling right now.
Oh man. Well, we were catching up before. I mean, when was the last time we talked? Was it like
You did something with the Knox and during pandemic.
Yeah, it was a pandemic one.
And it was one of those screen to screen kind of things, if that counts.
Yeah, so this is like our first time seeing each other in person in a long time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, maybe even our last record, maybe 2017 or something.
Wow.
Which is so weird to think about because it's like, you know, we've got new music coming out now, and the first record was 2011, so it's like we started in 2010. So 2010 to 2017 was 7 years, and it's been 7 years since our last LP. And so I've just been like, it's been kind of a trip for me to wrap my head around. It's just like a lot of life has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Kind of like the Howard Hughes of music. This guy's been hiding for 100 years.
You should have seen my fingernails last
Really?
week.
Was it
no, I got
gnarly?
I got a manicure just for you guys.
Is there a reason why it's been so long? Is it a creative juices thing, or it just is what it is?
Well, I mean, there was a little thing that happened in 2020 that, we were all indoors for a couple of years.
We recall.
But I don't know. I think like, I'm always writing songs. I'm always making music. And it was just kind of like, it was good to take a beat. We'd toured so much for so many years that after our last tour was in 2018, we went out with Paramore, and then 2020 we were going to go back out again, and then was home for a while. A lot of life happened, and then over the pandemic, kind of with this new record, that's like when I started to really focus in. Basically, 2022. We put an EP out in 2020 that we still haven't toured really. We did some Wiltern shows for the 10th anniversary of Torches, and those are the only shows that we've really played.
The song that we are playing on Alt 98.7, Lost in Space, rules.
Oh, thank you.
Booker and I heard this a couple weeks ago, and we were like, wait a minute, we got to play this one more time.
Then we were like, we got to go to the disco.
Yeah, and we got to hang out with Mark Foster a little bit. So is the full album, is that a representation of all the songs that are happening on the full album?
Thank you. I mean, I would say that the album started as kind of a case study on almost like a micro generation of like the mid 70s to the early 80s. I've always liked that music, but kind of when I was home, and didn't have a lot to do, I did like a case study. I was like, I want to figure out what's going on here, kind of the pre-post drum machine dance music, and that was really analog and had like live players and live instruments, but like felt that way. So like Chic, Giorgio Moroder, and some of the Gap Band stuff, like so a lot of this, like it all kind of had swing to it, and I don't know why I was drawn to it, but I started to make music kind of after like studying that and just focusing on it. And then over time, it just turned into a Foster the People record. But and it was really interesting because I went over to London. It was the first time traveling after a few years of being home. Called up my old friend Paul Epworth, who did our second record and some of our first record, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, and was just like, I'm in town, what are you doing? He's like, come by the studio. And he brought in Jack Pignate, who I'd been a fan of for a long time, but I'd never met. I was like, let's just make some music for fun. And that was kind of when the things really started, and ended up camping out there for a couple months in Studio B, writing a bunch of music, coming back to LA, and then kind of talking about that late 70s kind of era before we went into East West to like finish the record. I was lucky enough to hang out with Nile Rodgers, who came over to the house, and I played him some of the rough stuff that I'd been working on, including Lost in Space, before it was finished, which I was a little nervous to play Lost in Space because
I would be Nile
I was nervous.
Rodgers.
I mean, I was nervous to play him anything, but but that song in particular, I mean, the guitar that I was playing on that and the rhythm was just completely came from him, you know? So I'm just like, is he going to be like honored or is he going to be like,
you just ripped us off.
Yeah. But, you know,
what do you think? What do you say?
It was,
where does he start with you when you guys are having conversations, he's checking it out. Like, what's his vibe?
His vibe's amazing. Like he's like a really special person. And I learned a lot just in 3 hours talking to him about music. I learned more about songwriting than I had in years just from that conversation. But he was talking to me about early Chic and when Chic started and how he was like, you know, the 70s had gone through this, basically the worst recession since the Great Depression, post-Vietnam, kind of, you know, a lot of political turmoil. And so Nile, being a fan of history, was studying and listening to music from the Great Depression era. And a lot of those lyrics from that early, like kind of post-Great Depression music, he was putting on Chic songs, which was like very positive. You know, the whole thing, if you listen to Chic, it's just like there's just joy. There's joy in this disco funk. And it's funny because it makes you feel really good. But then musically, and this is kind of what popped out to me when I was kind of doing my deep dive, listening to it, was just like musically, it's actually incredibly deep. There's a lot of jazz, gospel. There's like Motown kind of inspired vocals. There's, you know, kind of that like the funk kind of influence, big band, all of these styles of music that are kind of almost in this postmodern way come together around in that kind of era to create what was, you know, disco and funk and everything that came after that. Early dance music, early house music. And so when he was telling me all that, it kind of was like a light bulb moment. I was like, that's why I was attracted. That's why I did this study and wanted to make something that felt like this, because now 50 years, like, you know, in the 70s, like basically 50 years after the Great Depression.
Right.
And here we are 50 years from then, going through similar economic and political turmoil.
Sure.
And the world has felt very dark. And I know for me, music's always been really healing. And as I sat with what I wanted our next record to feel like and sound like, there's a lot of thought that went into it. It's just like, how do I respond to culture and make music that doesn't feel super dark and depressing, but still acknowledges honestly what's happening, but has hope in it? Because I was like, what do I need right now? What do I need? What do I want to hear right now? I was like, fuck, I need hope, you know? And that's kind of what this song and what a lot of this record came from, that place of wanting to make something that wasn't vapid, that wasn't escapist, but had hope.
Mark Foster is with us. If you're listening on the radio, if you're watching, of course, you know what's happening here. How long did it take you to make all of these songs? Because just Lost in Space, it feels like this is not something that happens in 5 minutes. These are sometimes we talk to the artist, we got it done in 10 minutes. So starting the album to finishing, how long was that process? And what's the name of the album?
The album is, it's called Paradise State of Mind. And I would say, oh God, that's hard to answer. I usually, before I track and like finish a record, I like to have between 70 and 100 sketches.
Wow.
And then out of those, I'll basically pick kind of 15-ish, and then 15 to 20, and then end up usually between 10 and 12 will make the record. But we'll record, I think we recorded maybe like 13 or 14 for this one, and then 11 ended up on the record.
So you started this record basically whatever year this is and whatever year you were born, just add, it's like when you were 10 you started this record, because it sounds like a culmination of your whole everything. Like it sounds like pieces of a lot of different things from a long time, different thoughts, different ideas.
I would say that this record, like I was, you know, Lost in Space, I probably started the sketches of that in maybe 2020, 21. But I officially started really working on the record in 22. and then finished it in 23.
Got it. Now, what about bringing these songs to life? Have you played these live, like if you're doing a concert yet?
Haven't played anything live.
Holy mackerel. So what are your thoughts on that, and what is the practice going to be like?
There you go.
Figuring that out right now, actually. I mean, I would say it's the most rhythmic record we've ever made. Mm-hmm. It's probably the most musical record. Like, it was 95% analog, this record.
Really?
Even on Lost in Space, like the strings that you hear, it's a double quartet. So eight players that we recorded in the big room at East West, the Sinatra room there, which is a great string room. There's flute on the record. There's live horns on the record. There's all sorts of things. I mean, we camped out. So after that hang with Nile, which kind of illuminated things and pointed things in a certain direction, we went to the Pet Sounds room at East West, room 3, the smallest room there, which is like where the Wrecking Crew camped out and did a bunch of records, Mamas and Papas, and et cetera. I mean, kind of an iconic room, and it was so cool to be in there because you can see the scratches on the floor.
Wow.
In that room where I'm just like, you can just picture Hal Blaine and like, Carol Kay just setting up, and just, you can feel the energy still. It hasn't really changed. And so we camped out there for basically 2 months and finished the record. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
How do you think this is going to look live, though? Are you going to have to bring a lot of people in? Is this going to be you're going to go on tour, I imagine, and your fan base has done nothing weirdly. It's gotten bigger, and you haven't done anything for so long. So, I mean, you have the opportunity to still play really big rooms and use a lot of musicians. So, what do you think you'll opt to do?
I have no idea.
Sorry. I think I just bummed him out with the idea.
You know what?
He's like, there's so much music.
Well, here's the thing. Like, live, I feel like we've always done something live than what's different on the record. Like, and I love going to a live show where it has the essence of what the recorded music sounds like, but there's something new or there's something fresh about it. So with this, like, and it's always been a tricky thing with Foster the People because there's so many harmonies and vocals that, like, I wouldn't really be able to pull all that off without having probably 10 or 15 singers. So I have to figure that out. But I think for certain shows, we'll probably bring up some friends. We'll bring up some horns. We'll bring up maybe a quartet. We'll do some live strings, For other things, some of those melodies might translate well to a synth or a guitar. We'll have to figure it out, but it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of unpack this and figure out how to do this live.
Foster the People is a great live band. I've seen you play so many times. I have a question about some of your previous songs that I hear in the most random places in 2023. And of course, probably No Waters expects we're going to write this song and 15 years later it'll be on in Ralph's Supermarket. When you hear your song somewhere randomly these days, what's your reaction? You're like, holy crap, that's me up there.
I don't know. It is a little meta,
Where's the most random place you've heard yourself?
Oh man, I've heard Christiana, that that hippie commune in Denmark in Copenhagen. It's like a really strange. It's like kind of in the center of Copenhagen. And it's been this like protested, protected place where these people like Dylan went there and like did a show to keep it open back in the day. John Lennon went there. Like there's all these artists that have like fought for this like hippie commune. I remember walking through there and hearing our stuff on like a little boombox, next to like, I mean, it's a pretty wild place because the police would always try to raid it. And then all these like, they're kind of like, I don't know, these wild Mad Max hippies that would put up like they would set these big tire, mountains on fire and like stand on top with like pit bulls and have like, and they would face down with the police. And then I think like in the last couple of years, they finally got the rights to, cause it's like prime real estate there. Yeah. So the city, and they just squat. Yeah. And the city finally was like, you can stay.
I'm thinking he's going to say the car wash.
Yeah.
Rock and Roll Ralph's on Sunset.
Yeah. We got
somewhere in Denmark.
Somewhere. I think that's what he said.
We're going to be here invited to.
Some commune.
Paradise State of Mind. Is that also the name of a song on your album?
It is actually. Yeah. Okay. The title, that was, and that was day one, the song that when I relinked with Paul and Jack, on the first day in the studio, we wrote that song. So it was kind of marked the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
How weighty is this on you? The fact that you haven't done this for so long, is the excitement level like, ooh, I don't know? Or is it like, I just can't wait to get the music out. I can't wait to tour. Where's your head in all of this? Do you know yet?
You know, it's funny. Like I was talking about before, of just the 7 years between the beginning of the band and our last LP, and that same amount of time to now, it's like a lot's changed. I've changed. You know, I feel like the world, we've all gone through a lot together, and we've all experienced a lot of things individually within that collective chaos. And music to me has always been, and it's easy to take for granted when you've been around it and you've been doing it for so long, how healing music is, and how powerful music is to unite people.
Yes.
And that was the thing that kind of going into this, it just felt like the right time for us to come back out into culture. I know for me, it's like, I felt so disconnected. I felt I went dark online. I kind of pulled back from everything. And I think like internally on the outside, it's so funny. We live in an age now where if your life isn't on display, then people either forget about you or they don't know where you stand on things. And they kind of assume that it's weird. People make up all sorts of stories kind of in their own heads if they can't see what you're doing in your day to day. And I know for me, it's like externally, everything looked very quiet. And internally was just this raging garden and like mountain ranges forming and really being, I feel like, melted in a crucible in a lot of ways. Like over the pandemic, doing a lot of deep diving and processing. And this record was kind of, I guess, the purging of all of those thoughts. And it was a mountain. This was probably the hardest record I've ever made. Wow. in certain ways, but also on the flip side of that, maybe the most cathartic.
I have another question. You've talked about some of the spots you've recorded, and it feels like you're a historian of music and appreciate the past, and some of that actually inspires you. Is that how you've ticked mentally from day one when it comes to your career?
I mean, I love people, and I love culture and watching culture, like observing kind of where things are at and the mood. And I think that's all like really interesting. It's always been a muse, you know, to react to culture. I love artists that have always personified an idea of culture, even if they've become a villain in that story. I feel like that's like a really effective way to tell a story. Like, which on this record was extra tricky because of the kind of the time that we're in right now, which feels like what can artists say? A lot of art has been misunderstood, or people are like, you can't do that. You can't say that. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, look at any film from the 70s. Like, there's moments in time where it's so provocative and so explosive, and I feel like that's so important.
Yes.
Yeah. But walking into it with this, you know, I just kept coming back to like hope. Make something that brings people together. Yeah. We don't need to provoke anything. Everything is beyond provoked.
The bear's been poked.
The bear gets poked like daily. Yeah. Like something's poking the bear right now. So it's just like, for me, I just needed to kind of calm down, get to a place of like, I can't control any of these things. I'm just a songwriter. But I can make music because that's what's going to make me feel better.
Yeah. The world ebbs and flows, and you go with it. And, you know, if the world's crazy up here, it sounds like you want to be down here dancing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And that's what we've heard so far. That's what it sounds like. You know, it's just like, let's bring in that. Let's get the vibe back. Let's get all this together going, you know?
And connect. I'm glad we connect in person. We have connected in person again.
Yeah.
And musically, I know we've connected with the songs and everyone else is. And thanks so much for hanging out with us, Mark Foster.
And thanks so much for having me back. It's so nice to talk to you guys in person. And
yeah.
You too, man.
Not over a stupid
Let's
computer.
go, baby. Yeah. Paradise state of mind. Let's go, Foster the people.
There you go. Mark Foster with Booker and Stryker. It is Alt 98.7.